Hi, this is Ollie. Welcome to Possibility Space. Today I'm going to read you, why is Zack Polanski the only politician making sense of the Manchester Synagogue attack? This week, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, worshippers were attacked outside a synagogue in Manchester. Before the bodies were cold, and before the facts were clear, right-wingers were already twisting the attack to their own ends. Columnist Stephen Pollard suggested that pro-Palestinian journalist Owen Jones had incited the attack. The Daily Mail's political editor, Jason Groves, insinuated that Zara Sultana's call to expel Israel's ambassador had led to the attack. Columnist Dan Hodges works for Groves at the Mail. He faced no consequences when, earlier this year, he advocated war crimes against Palestinian children. He saw the attack as a chance to push for a total ban on pro-Palestinian marches and a, quote, legal reckoning for Owen Jones. Israel itself claimed the UK government's recognition of Palestine had led to the attack and used it as an excuse to formally invite the far-right activist Tommy Robinson on a sort of state visit. British politics now works as a posting-to-policy pipeline. Online writing becomes government edict. The right-wing press conjured a link between opposing the killing of civilians in Gaza and the murders at a synagogue in Manchester. Just hours later, government ministers adopted this rhetoric. British Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood called pro-Palestinian protests, quote, fundamentally un-British. She urged them to stop after the attack. Now she's using the attack to further restrict protest by giving the police more powers. There is a lot wrong with Mahmood's framing on this issue, so let's unpack it. Labour figures often minimise the genocide in Gaza as a Muslim-only issue. This plays into latent suspicions that Muslims in Western countries are more loyal to the Middle East than to their own constituency. Mahmood leans into this smear by equating being pro-Palestinian with being un-British. You'd hope she'd know better, given she's a Muslim herself. Maybe she does. Regardless, she is the latest in a long line of black and brown ministers appointed to launder racist policies. You might think that is a bold claim that downplays Mahmood's achievements, but it's not me saying it. Labour Party figures admitted it when they appointed her. Quote, she's the perfect choice for Home Secretary. She's as hard as nails on immigration, but she's a Muslim woman. The left won't know how to attack her. For thousands of years, people have also accused Jews of dual loyalty. Mahmood insists that protesting against Britain's arming a genocide will upset British Jews, reinforcing this trope. Many British Jews take part in these marches, but those aren't the Jews that Mahmood cares about. Her insidious framing conflates British Jews with Israel, then pits Jewish safety against Palestinian liberation and the British right to protest. There's a British term for this kind of behaviour: shit-stirring. Condemning murders at a synagogue and opposing the killing of civilians in Gaza can go together. They're not mutually exclusive. I have enough pro-Palestinian, anti-Zionist Jewish friends and family to know this. But that's not the case for a lot of people. Jews make up a fraction of a percentage of Britain's population. Many Britons don't know a Jew, and that is why Mahmood's rhetoric is so dangerous. Given how politically live this issue is, we don't have nearly enough polling on it. But the polls we do have disprove Mahmood's worldview. They indicate that Western Jews oppose Israel's supremacist project. Furthermore, if you read hate crime reports, it becomes clear very quickly that pretending that all Jews back the Israeli government puts all Jews at greater risk. Predictably, London's institutionally racist Metropolitan Police Force agree with Mahmood. Pro-Palestine Action protesters were asked to delay their planned actions. The request cited concerns about, quote, significant pressure on policing during a time of significant fear and concern in communities. It's a sleight of hand that blames pro-Palestine activists for the police work incurred by their own criminalisation. A tacit admission that the politically motivated crackdown on grannies holding signs is indeed a waste of resources. Palestine Action are, according to the British government, a terrorist organisation. I previously warned that by redefining protest as terrorism, the government has diverted police from real counter-terrorism work. It is absurd, and it will mean more preventable attacks occurring unimpeded. What a depressing thing to have written less than a month ago. This week's attack, along with the farcical sight of cops politely asking terrorists to be responsible and not do terrorism because they're all very busy, underlines my point. Thankfully, not all British politicians are as cynical and divisive as Shabana Mahmood. Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana have made strong statements, but Zack Polanski, the Green leader, has impressed me the most. His statesman-like response to Mahmood's comments is worth quoting at length.
This is a horrific attack. As you say, I'm a Jewish man who grew up. I went to a synagogue that was very close to this synagogue. I went to school close to this synagogue. So this is both personal for me and is political. I suppose my deep reflection on a day like this is the work that I'm proudest of as one of the 5 people in the last 100 years to be in a leadership position in British politics that is Jewish, is to say that I'm really proud of interfaith work, where I've come together with the Muslim community to say actually an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us, and actually the only authentic response is solidarity. We need community cohesion and we need people to stick together.
Shabana Mahmood said that she was disappointed to see pro-Palestinian marches go ahead after the attack last night across the country. She said that she thought it was dishonourable. She said people could have just stepped back and given communities a day or two to grieve and process what had happened. Does she have a point, do you think?
No, I think Shabana Mahmood is also being deeply irresponsible. There's a lot of it about. I think ultimately conflating protests against a genocide in Gaza and ultimately weaponising that against an anti-Semitic attack on our streets, a terrorist attack, is deeply irresponsible. And again, democratic, non-violent protest is a cornerstone of our democracy. And I think it's worrying when government are increasingly trying to crush down dissent and again using what is a brutal attack that many of us in the Jewish community, in fact all of us in the Jewish community, are feeling very deeply, to try and use that to point at a protest and say people don't have a right to also speak out against a genocide, is both conflating issues, it's incoherent, and is exactly the opposite of what we need from politicians. We need statesmanship in this moment. We need responsibility. We need people to be sensitive about their language, but also recognise that there is complexity to this, and it can't just be about finger-pointing at people who are very worried about a genocide.
In practical terms, the Prime Minister has pledged extra security for synagogues and other places where Jewish people will gather. Do you feel enough is being done to protect people?
I think it can't just be about spending more money and investment. That's part of it. But actually, this country right now is having a conversation about patriotism. And I think that probably needs to be a deeper conversation than just waving flags. I think it has to be about why do some people not feel like they belong here? Why do they feel unwelcome? And actually, how can we make sure that everyone feels loved for their community and loved from their community? Those are complex things, particularly when there are tensions in our communities. But we know when we get this right, this is what's part of what makes Britain great. Migration, multiculturalism is all really important part of being British. It also requires the work. And I think far too often the work is not done. Instead, there's just been angry words. We need to not conflate the Jewish community and the ongoing genocide in Gaza. And actually putting those two things together, I say personally as a Jewish person, makes me feel more at risk. I think you can both be absolutely clear that anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in our country is totally unacceptable. And you can stand against the ongoing genocide and our government's complicity, in fact, active enabling by selling arms to Israel. Those are two different issues, but we can hold the nuance and complexity of recognising right is right and wrong is wrong, and we can say that clearly.
What a breath of fresh air. A capable leader with a distinct political, personal and religious identity who's wielding that identity to stick up for everybody from all walks of life. Polanski proposes that we form broad, interfaith and intercommunal coalitions to overcome bigotry. This approach is known as safety through solidarity. If you want to know more about it, I've written and podcasted about it before, so you'll be able to find it in the feed. So, what allows Polanski to show such nuance and empathy in a political climate that abhors these traits? First, he's very good at his job, a skilled communicator who is deeply involved in anti-racist communities. He's doing the work. He also lacks the instinct that has pushed the Parliamentary Labour Party away from their traditional base. He doesn't prioritise the quote-unquote special relationship between the UK and the US at all costs. He draws the line at genocide. The Labour Party's instincts has driven it to support a US-backed genocide and stay silent on the topic of America's lurch towards fascism. Their discomfort with their position is why they use Judaism as a shield from criticism. This puts Jews in danger. Polanski isn't weighed down by any of this. He's ready to embrace the new multipolar world, while the Labour Party clings to the old dying one. Lastly, Polanski is Jewish. This shields him from the typical right-wing strategy of branding anyone who supports Palestinians as anti-Semitic. This doesn't mean they're not trying, just that it's not sticking. Attentive Possibility Space listeners will have noticed that I pulled this trick earlier in this podcast. I invoked my Jewish family as a shield. It's a shameful and cowardly thing to do. We need to dismantle the profoundly racist political and media culture that makes it a strategic thing to do. On this topic, like most other topics, Mohammed El-Kurd has me dead to rights. Quote, "I'm interested in interrogating this drive towards the politics of appeal. The premise that Jews, Israelis and Westerners are less biased or more truthful is entirely unfounded, for it presumes that they have no skin in the game. This persuasive technique is fallacious because it does not appeal to their authority as, for instance, human rights organizations, but to their authority as Jewish or European or American institutions, first and foremost. If such specious reasoning is strategic, what does that reveal about our world? Mohammed El-Kurd is right, and Zack Polanski is right. And strategically, I'm giving Polanski the last word.
We need unity, we need complicated conversations, and we need to bring people together rather than divide.
Thank you for listening. Possibility Space is a reader and listener supported publication. If you enjoyed this, you can subscribe for free or you can become a paid member. Thanks a lot for listening. See you next time.